Hey, what's up guys, it's Nick too. I haven't made a video in a really long time, and also I moved all of my stuff into a new room, so my apologies if the quality's low. Obviously my hair looks ridiculous, camera lighting is all over the place, whatever. I've never had good quality in the first place. Getting into the video, so today we're going to be looking at Fury Warrior in patch 9.1 of Shadowlands. We're going to be going over absolutely everything that you need to know so that you can walk into Sanctum of Domination and slap Sylvanas' cheeks in half. Our class is actually looking at not complete garbage, bottom tier, single target this patch, which has me pretty excited for the raid because it would be a nice change of pace to actually get to see myself on the meter. So I'm going to be going over everything that you guys need to know in order to actually be able to see yourself on the meter this time. There's going to be timestamps in the description if you're interested in just, skipping through trying to find certain information that is available to you. In terms of rotation, I've already made a video on that. The rotation is pretty much exactly the same as it always has been. If anything changes, such as trinkets, legendary tuning, shards of domination, anything like that, I'll leave it down in the description below. So if you're watching this video like a month in the future, just check the description down below, see if anything has changed. But yeah, real quick before I get into everything though, I'd like to thank today's sponsor, which helps enable me to keep creating content for a living, and that sponsor is Raid Shadow Legends. Raid Shadow Legends, if you somehow haven't already heard of it, is an impressively high quality action RPG game that's available on both mobile and PC that has millions of players, an enormous amount of content to sink your teeth into, ranging from PvP, dungeon runs, campaign battles, boss fights, and just tons more, with over 500 champions and hundreds of artifacts to collect. There's a ton of stuff you can do in Raid. Make sure to check out the link in the description. Raid is unlike a lot of other mobile games where it actually has some surprisingly difficult content with some intricate kind of raid-like bosses. One of my favorite bosses is the Fire Knight. Not only does he look super cool, but he has an interesting mechanic where his shield makes him immune to debuffs and damage, so you actually need to specifically pick champions who can dish out a ton of hits on each attack, which is going to slowly chip away at his shield, then making him damageable, and if you don't, you're gonna end up like this. What I personally really like about Raid is how many champions there are and how much they impact your gameplay. There's a huge amount of different skills, and customizing them to find the best combination is just a ton of fun and feels like a true RPG experience, mixing and matching all the different champions. I've been using this guy a ton because his unique skill makes him unkillable for a turn, which is just really cool, and I also really like this champion for reasons. Luckily for you guys, this month Raid has a non-stop schedule for summer events and activities, including fusion events, so you can unlock a brand new legendary champion. There's also 5 new champions that look nuts coming out at the same time. There's a ton of giant updates coming out very, very soon, so there's literally just never been a better time to jump into Raid. If you want to get a huge head start, hit the link in the description or scan the QR code on screen, and you'll get an epic hero Chinoru, something like that, along with 200,000 silver, an XP boost, an energy refill, and an Ancient Shard. You can summon an awesome champion as soon as you get in game. You can also find extra rewards here in your inbox for the next 30 days. Make sure to click the link in the description, and thanks to Raid for sponsoring this video. Alright, with that out of the way, let's just get right into it. So I know a lot of people are probably going to ask, what about Arms Warrior? I'm not going to be talking about this today. I'll probably make a separate guide referring to Arms. However, most warriors right now plan to play Fury, and the reason is because with Venthyr we get a new legendary, one of the Covenant specific legendaries called Sinful Surge. I'll talk about that a little bit, but basically it just gives us the potential to do actual single target damage, not being at the bottom of the meter anymore in pure single target. And as we know, in Raid, single target is incredibly valuable, which is why I recommend most people to go Venthyr if you're interested in doing the Raid. However, if you are, Premier Mythic Plus player, then both Night Fae and Kyrian are very good. I would say that Night Fae is a little bit better. The only problem with Night Fae, however, is that you actually do so much burst damage that it's very difficult for tanks to keep aggro off of you. And if you're just somebody that you pug like 10s, 11s, 12s, 13s, 15s, whatever, those tanks are really going to have trouble keeping aggro off of you. And if you know what you're doing, you're going to take aggro a lot, and it's not a lot of fun to play with. However, Kyrian doesn't really have that problem. I haven't personally played Kyrian. Both of them, I've heard, however, do very good AoE damage, so that's what I'd recommend if you're going AoE. This isn't to say that Venthyr doesn't have good AoE. Venthyr, I would say, has pretty consistent AoE, but it's just not as bursty, and it isn't as much damage as you're going to get from Night Fae, etc. I've played a lot of Night Fae. The damage there is absolutely crazy, but Venthyr is going to be what you want to go for pretty much the overall pick. However, Night Fae is a close second, and then I would only do Kyrian if, I don't know, you want to play Kyrian or something. Going over the Soulbinds. So for Venthyr, we are going to be Nausea. The reason for this is Thrill Seeker is just really good, and eventually you end up getting Fatal Flaw. Whenever Thrill Seeker goes away, you also get Crit of Versatility, whichever you have more of, which is also really good. The problem really is just that Theatar, the Soothing Shade, it's not as consistent as Thrill Seeker is. Thrill Seeker isn't that great in the first place, however, Soothing Shade, a lot of the time it'll proc, and then you have to move out of it, and then you got no uptime, and it just has a pretty low proc rate as it is. But one thing that Nausea has that Theatar doesn't is Dauntless Duelist, which is just going to give you 3% more flat damage in single target to an enemy once you hit them, which is incredibly powerful. So we're pretty much going to be playing Nausea all the time, and then anytime that we're in Mythic Plus, we just swap off Dauntless Duelist for the extra potency slot here, and we pick up Harrowing Punishment. Before I talk about the Conduits, let's talk about the other Soulbinds if you plan to play Night Fae. I'm not going to really go over Kyrian because I don't actually know. Pretty sure you just play Pelagos, and it's pretty obvious. So if you're doing single target, so if you're in the raid, you pretty much want to play Naya, and then you play Naya with Naya's Tools Burrs because this just does an absolute ton of damage. And then if you're going in AoE, you play Corrin with First Strike, wherever it is right here. Whatever, it's the same thing. You play Naya in single target with Naya Tools Burrs, and then you play Corrin in AoE with First Strike, and then I'd recommend getting a Weak Aura to track First Strike, because this is pretty much the whole reason that Corrin is really good in AoE, is you just proc this over and over. And I mean, 25% crit chance on pull in Mythic Plus is incredibly powerful. Like I said, for Kyrian, I'm pretty sure you can just play Pelagos and be fine. So in terms of the Conduits, in Raid, your absolute best Conduit, specifically if you're Venthyr as well, is going to be Ashen Juggernaut. Condemn increases the crit chance of Condemn by 2%, stacking up to 8 times. Depends on the item level, of course. This just gives you a ton of additional crit with Condemn, which is just more damage. Alternatively, the second best is going to be Depths of Insanity. If you're playing Night Fae, Depths of Insanity is going to be the first pickup that you want to go for, because if you're like early into the tree on Naya, you can only get 1 potency, and Depths of Insanity is what you want because you're not going to be in execute range as much on Night Fae or on Kyrian as you are as Venthyr. So Venthyr, Ashen Juggernaut is number 1, and then number 2 is Depths of Insanity. Number 3 is usually going to be Dauntless Duelist and single target. However, when I swap over to AoE, I just put on Harrowing Punishment. The more targets that you are, the more damage your Condemn is going to do, and this is just overall very good. In terms of your other Conduits, Finesse, same thing as always. You want to be playing Inspiring Presence to just make Rally more insane, and then for your Endurance Conduit, you always want to go Stalwart Guardian. Honestly, I don't even know what I'm going to do with these other slots. They are actually so unimpactful that I don't even know. I don't really care. Once I have enough renown to actually go down this tree, I'm actually just going to go Sinful Preservation, because that just makes my Healthstone and Health Potions 50% more effective, which is actually crazy in a raid setting if you think about it. And then I'll just get another Finesse Conduit. I'll probably just get Safeguard or something for my other Finesse Conduit, and then if I ever play this one, I have no idea what I'll put there. It actually doesn't matter. Conduits aren't that big of a deal. As long as you got the potencies down and you have your 1 good Finesse and your 1 good Endurance, you're more than set. All right, now let's talk about Legendaries. So this is going to change based on what Covenant you're playing, based on if you're doing single target or AoE content. And that's pretty much it. For Venthyr, pretty much the main reason we're going Venthyr is for Sinful Surge. Condemn extends the duration of Recklessness by 2 seconds. Whenever you're in Condemn, this is effectively going to give you 100% uptime on Recklessness, which gives you actually good damage in single target, assuming that you have full uptime on like a Boston Patchwork. This is incredibly powerful, and like I said, this is the entire reason that you are pretty much playing Venthyr. Currently, I don't have this unlocked because it's not even in the game yet, because you can't actually get 48 renown. However, I'm going to be getting that tomorrow once Mythic comes out, but I didn't want to make this video during Mythic week because I'm in a pretty high-end guild and I'm going to be really busy, raiding. So yeah, in terms of what slot you want to make this on, you want to make it on your neck, because head and shoulder are both domination pieces. We're going to be talking about domination sockets in a second here, but Sinful Surge is what you want for single target. And then in AoE for Venthyr, you're still going to be playing Signet of Tormented Kings. You're also still going to be playing Signet of Tormented Kings if you're doing AoE on both Night Fae or Kyrian. The only other legendary you would ever consider making as a Fury Warrior would be Nature's Fury if you're playing Night Fae. However, this requires the enemies to completely stand in your Ancient Aftershock the entire time, and it's just really boring. I'd recommend still just playing Signet of Tormented Kings either way, but if you have extra Soul Ash and you're playing Night Fae or something, then you can make that. And if you're playing Kyrian, you still just want to be playing Signet of Tormented Kings pretty much at all times. However, I do recommend most people to go Venthyr because I think it has the most versatility, I guess you could say, and because Sinful Surge is just a super fun playstyle. When you have it, having 100% uptime during Recklessness, like you hit 35%, you press Recklessness, and you're in Recklessness forever, and that is just awesome because the entire expansion we've had very, very bad single target, and this makes it to where we don't have bad single target, and that's great. Oh, and in terms of the slot that you would want to make the Nature's Fury, you want to make it on the back because that is not a Shard of Domination socket piece. In terms of gear, let's first talk about Domination sockets. So if you guys already don't know, there are certain pieces of gear in the raid that come with Domination sockets on them pretty much at all times. And then there's also gear, or Domination Shards rather, that drop from the raid. It actually doesn't show up on the loot pool, but there's Domination Shards that drop from the raid, such as Shard of These Nuts right here. That is just going to pretty much, they're really, really boring. They pretty much just make you do additional damage. Ideally, you want to get as many of these Domination Shard pieces that you can, or Domination socket gear items as you can. They come on the gloves, wrist, chest, shoulder, and the helmet. So you can get a total of 5 of them. There are 3 of them that directly increase your damage. There's a damaging frost one, damaging unholy one, and a damaging blood one. This is currently the damaging unholy one. However, the biggest damage increase that you can get is getting a 3-piece of one of the socket bonuses, which is going to be 3-piece unholy. If this sounds confusing and really unnecessary, it's because it is. Blame Blizzard, not me. Sorry if my explanation of it is bad. But basically, the first thing that you're going to want to try to do is get 3 unholy shards, and then also get a helmet so that you can actually benefit from the 3 unholy shard bonus, which is Chaos Bane, which pretty much just increases your primary stat at all times. However, if you can't get the helmet, or you just don't have that and you've gotten a bunch of the other shards, such as, let's say that you got the Unholy DPS shard and then you got the Frost DPS shard, just throw that in gear as you get it. It really doesn't matter because you can just buy something from a Death's Advance vendor. It's somewhere in my bag. It's this thing, it costs some Stygia. You just rip the socket out and you can put it on at your own free will. Pretty much there are 3 damaging ones that you want, and then you want the 3-piece from Unholy. So ideally you have a damaging Frost, damaging Blood, damaging Unholy, and then you have the other 2 Unholies for a total of 5, so that you get the Unholy set bonus, and then you also get all the other damaging ones. The biggest damage increase, like I said, is getting the 3-piece of Unholy. Pretty much just use whichever ones you get at any given time, but that is your priority, is getting the helmet with the Unholy, and then getting the other 2 pieces. That's why you're wanting to craft the Legendary on the neck, because all the other pieces are Domination socket pieces, and it's not worth it to craft there. Alright, while we're on the topic of gear, let's take a look at Trinkets. So this is Blood Mallet. This pretty much just shows single target. This is pretty much just a hierarchy of the Trinkets in single target. I'm going to be talking about all of the ones that I think are actually good, because I don't think this is 100% representative of what you should be going out for, but it's a fairly decent way to put things into perspective. So first off, as you can see, Old Warrior Soul is absolutely insane, and this is your #1 priority in terms of the trinket that you should get. It drops from Sylvanas, but as you can see, it absolutely dumpsters every other trinket, and that's because it literally is just strength and just gives you haste. With very high uptime, you just get a ton of haste, and for Fury, haste is your best stat by an absolute mile. So this is very, very, very good, regardless of AoE or single target, and as you can see, even at 220 item level, which is going to be LFR, it's still better than literally every other trinket here. At 233, which is normal mode, it's simming like 200 DPS higher than my Stone Legion Heraldry at 233. So yeah, pretty insane, pretty mandatory, I would say. The only thing you really want to talk about is what you put in the other slot. So as you can see, Titanic Ocular Gland seems pretty high here. If you're a raider, you can probably get this at decent item level, maybe like, 239 or 252, because it drops from the second boss in the raid. The only problem with it is that while your health is below 50%, you lose damage. So if there's for some reason a fight where you're consistently below 50%, this is going to nerf your damage, and I think because of that fact, and it not giving you so much additional stat in the first place, that I kind of don't even want to bother with it. However, if I, kill the eye tomorrow and this drops, I'm probably going to equip it. But sometimes if there's certain fights where I'm consistently below 50%, I may take it off. Ideally, however, I probably want to get a File of Putrefaction and upgrade that bad boy to max. A lot of these other ones sim higher, but the Sinful Gladiator's Badge of Alacrity, I don't think is going to be better than a File at max item level. It's like, it says that it's like slightly better, but I don't really think so. And I also just don't have access to that at a high item level. But if you're doing PvP, the Sinful Gladiator's Insignia of Alacrity is pretty good, just straight up haste. Anima Field Emitter, I don't trust. It requires that you actually get the... It's kind of like Theatar, it procs, you have to stand in it. Don't trust that. IQD, screw that trinket. I guess it just gives you a bunch of haste. This is probably decent. I'm still just going to stick with File though, or Overwhelming Power Crystal. Another thing that I would recommend looking into is the Ticking Sack of Terror. So for whatever reason, this doesn't sim very high on Blood Mallet, and that's kind of one of the reasons why I don't entirely trust Blood Mallet. I did a sim myself at 226, simming over my 229 File. It sims as a 60 DPS increase at only 226, and that is a lot of damage. There's not a lot of people that have it, however, I found a log of somebody using it, and in this log, as you can see, the volatile detonation did 3.8%, which is almost a full percent more than his File of Putrefaction that he has. So that is pretty substantial. I've also seen, I was watching Gromnak play, if any of you guys know him, and on one pull, this did like 6% of his damage, which is just insane. It seems to have the potential to have really high procs, whereas Liquefying Ooze is pretty much, always very consistent. So this seems to be a really easy pickup, especially because you can just go into Tazavesh and have a pretty high chance of getting it. And that sim was also at 226. At 233, it's going to sim even higher. I don't know what guy does it drop off of. Here, it drops off of Mailroom Mayhem. You get it at 233. Just does a whole bunch of extra damage. I imagine that it scales in AoE with Meat Cleaver, but I don't actually know for sure. But Mastery is just straight up a lot of extra damage as well. So in terms of trinkets, I would just try to get Old Warrior Soul, and then for the second one, I would go for File, Ticking Sack of Terror, and then all the other ones that I mentioned are pretty good as well. In terms of stats, like I mentioned, Haste is by far and away your best stat. Currently, Haste is simming incredibly high on raid bots. I think something is wrong with the APL, or it literally just sims that high. I don't know. It's really weird because it's simming significantly higher than it has ever before, even with me already having 28% Haste. My recommendation would just be try to get as much haste as you can, maybe stop around 26, 27, 28% haste, and then just pump the rest into mastery. However, item level, getting just straight up strength is always going to trump having better secondary stats, unless for some reason like your ring is like 2 item level higher or something, and it's like verse crit and you just don't care about that. But the hierarchy of your stats is going to be haste, mastery, crit, and then versatility. And then for your enchants on your chest, you just want Eternal Skirmish for single target, or you can change that to plus stats for AoE. Cloak doesn't really matter, stam avoidance or leech or speed, whatever, or just flat stam, up to you. And then for the weapon enchants, you want Sinful and Celestial for single target, and then if you're doing AoE like Mythic Plus, you can swap out Sinful for Lightless Force. However, then you lose a little bit of boss damage, so up to you. You do swap targets a lot in AoE, so Sinful isn't going to be as valuable in AoE, whereas Lightless Force is just a proc that always does damage. In terms of your talents, this is going to change based on encounter and also based on the Covenant that you're playing. If you're playing single target Venthyr, this is what you want to be set up as: Sudden Death, Double Time, Massacre, Warpaint or Bounding Stride, Cruelty, and then you play Dragon Roar with Sinful Surge, but if you put on Signet, you're going to be playing Bladestorm, and then Anger Management at all times. The only thing that you swap if you're going to go into AoE is Fresh Meat, to just make Bloodthirst always enrage you. And then if you're doing a fight like Sylvanas, where you're actually not going to be able to benefit from Massacre, then you put on Frenzy. Or if you're playing Night Fae, you can also put on Frenzy, and then Night Fae with Signet, you stay with this setup pretty much at all times, unless you're doing AoE, where then you put on Massacre and Fresh Meat. Otherwise, you play Sudden Death, Frenzy for single target, and then you keep Bladestorm on with Signet, but if you take Signet off, then you play Dragon Roar. Makes sense? Okay, that's a lot of stuff. You could also play Siegebreaker with that legendary instead of AM. However, I think AM is universally going to be better because lowering the cooldown on that, there's a lot of fights in the raid where having Recklessness on a 1 minute as opposed to a minute 30 is incredibly good because it lines up with a lot of like ad spawns, KT timings, etc. That's pretty much it for the video. Hopefully this taught you guys everything that you need to know. If you have questions, please feel free to leave them down in the comments. Like I said, if anything changes, I'll make sure to update it. Haven't made a video in a while. Sorry for the garbage quality. Hopefully you got everything that you needed to from it. Thanks for watching. Drop a like if you enjoyed, and enjoy the tier, boys. Hopefully we're not useless on Sylvanas. Hopefully they do something for Mythic. Otherwise, I'm going to be sad. I'm not looking forward to 300 pulls on a boss that I can't press execute on, but, you know, you never know. All right, see ya.